Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to my Zoom room. I'm going to give a little talk about the Three of Swords before I get started. Just going to light a candle, which you can see there. Just blessings to the Three of Swords. I've been doing a lot of grief work in August last month, and I ended up doing this wonderful drawing of my version of the Three of Swords. I was doing a lot of work with the Morgan, who's usually represented by three crows or three ravens. So a lot of times now here's our usual Three of Swords from the Rider deck, or as I like to call it, the Pamela Coleman Smith deck, since she did all the art, and then the white dudes took all the credit. That's neither here nor there. That's a talk for another time. You can see, we've got the basic image is a heart with three swords coming out of it. There's some rain in the background, but I always found like that the main image is a little static. I'll show you the image from the Fedor Pavlov deck, which is my all-time favorite tarot card deck. You can see we have an anatomical heart, three swords. It almost looks more visceral and painful in this deck just because of the realness of the heart. But the heart isn't bleeding, even though there's some rain in the background. And I always felt like this card was saying to me, like, one of the potential messages, of course, it depends on the other cards that come up in the reading and what's true for you, was that, there's an invitation like, hey, you really got to get some of this grief flowing. So I just had my three crow friends tearing up my heart. Bring this closer so you can see a little better. And then that just turning into this wonderful river of feeling. So I guess like the question is, the Three of Swords, this is kind of a tough card when it comes up in a reading. And after working with this card all month, I sort of had this issue where I was really diligent about my grief work. If nothing else, I'm very diligent about my practice. And I got to this place where Spirit was like, actually, you know what? Like, you need to lighten up. And it's not just all grief all the time. And it made me think about the numeric correspondences in the tarot card deck and how that can be helpful. So I wanted to show you. In the tarot, here's our friend, the Three of Swords. But, the other suits, which represent other elements, also have their threes. Again, this is the Fedor Pavlov deck. My only beef is that the three of the original whatever. I like decks that are based on Pamela Coleman Smith's art, and in her artwork she has three people, but Fedor Pavlov likes to edit out all of the religious references, so he took out the priest in his rendition. So, but I like the card with three people since it's a three, but that's neither here nor there. Three of Swords, as I wrote on my blog, even though there's like top emotions that can be there too, like jealousy, anger, fear, I feel like underneath it all is this really deep-seated grief from an old wound. But I think if, in the tarot, we always use, especially like in a reading, like if you had, multiple threes come up and the three becomes really significant. And threes all correspond to each other in the deck. And I'll get into some of the other correspondences, but at least in terms of the pips or the minors, swords represents air, wands fire, pentacles earth, three cups. And especially like I really love this drawing of the Three of Cups. We have three friends dancing around a maypole with their three cups and being really joyous. And sort of the message to me was like, yes, grief work, excellent. But like also there's like, if you don't bring in like resource, and if you don't bring in like some temperance in there, then you can really deplete yourself, even re-injure yourself as you're drawing out these swords. And so there's sort of like some other messages. So, Three of Cups, for example, like joy, also a natural part of life, just as vital as grief. Working together in community, being creative. And then Three of Wands, to me, this card, and this might not be a typical reading, but I always see this as patience, because wands are usually fiery and running around getting shit done. But here, there's this fellow, and he's either watching his ships depart or his ships come in. He's very content, and so there's a waiting, there's a patience there for me at least. Also, scoot these up. Whenever I see a 3, it always, the mother correspondence to me is usually the Empress, who is the 3rd card in the Major Arcana. I love Pavlov's drawing. Here's the Rider / Pamela Colman Smith drawing, but I just love this Empress, and she is just super juicy as can be, very creative, usually represented by Venus. And so there's a real creativity to the 3s. There's a juiciness to 3s, and I think, you know, if we can get, when we're doing 3 of Swords work, if we can remember that juiciness and that aliveness of creativity, that can be really helpful. Now, of course, there's other correspondences for 3 as we go through the majors. There's Death, and this is why I bought the deck, because this is my absolute favorite. I was like, oh, I saw this card and I was like, must have this deck. But there's Death, 13, so ending in 3, as well as the Hanged One, number 12, and 1 + 2 = 3. And actually, I'm just noticing now, it looks like the same figure in the card, right? Of course, they immediately precede this card. So Hanged One, we're not going to have, like, I could do a whole nother video on just the Hanged One. But I usually think about this card, especially since it's sort of a Neptunian card, about dissolving. There's a sort of ego death here. This person is being persecuted for their beliefs. This is a ancient medieval way of torturing people who did not conform. But you can see the person isn't suffering in the card. They have a peaceful expression. So sorry, it's like a little hard to, there we go. You can see it a little better. They have a peaceful expression. So there's a surrendering to the suffering. And then, of course, Death, a very Scorpio kind of card, is Compost. So there's no regeneration without doing some composting work. And I really feel like 3 of Swords work is really juicy composting work. And finally, in the majors, we have the final card of the Major Arcana, the World card. And she is 21. 2 + 1 is 3. Much like the Hanged One, just opposite. Hanged One is 12. This is 21. And she's come to the completion of her journey through whatever phase she's in, surrounded by usually all 4 elements and a complete journey. So I actually, I've really been thinking deeply about 3s in the tarot, and it's almost like the spine of the tarot. It goes throughout. So if we think about the majors, we start with, well, some say you start with the Fool. I think the Fool is a wild card. It can go anywhere. Start with the Magician. Magician's 1. High Priestess is 2. You add them together, you get the Empress. And so there's a juiciness there. There's a creativity there. We start with Empress, and then, toward the middle, we get this transformation, ego death, compost. We can call this card Compost. Scorpio Compost. And then at the end of the journey, there's just this beautiful completion, this coming full circle. And so if we kind of think about 3s like that, and at 3s as like taking us through the entire journey of the tarot, then the 3 of Swords becomes a really fruitful method of composting. In fact, I use this deck because it has the clearest visual correspondence. You can see, let me hold her a little closer to you. You can see that the Empress is holding up a heart here. I can actually hold it up this way and it'll be a little clearer. This is how I do my sessions too. So it's easy to see all the cards, and I can do a close-up. So she's holding an anatomical heart. And in the 3 of Swords, of course, we have a heart being pierced. So, oops, just gonna hold these up to the screen. So there, even this is, listen, I'm not saying that Three of Swords is not a tough card. It's tough, but usually when it comes up, for me, it feels spot on, and it has to do with the deep wounding. But isn't it Rumi who says the wound is where the light comes through, right? That's the work, that's the opportunity. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not love and light bypassing pain, please believe me, but there is something to working through that pain that's essential to the journey, because the major arcana is really reflecting in an archetypal way the journeys we all take throughout our lives, and grief is an integral part. The shadow emotions are an integral part of that, but at the same time, they need to be in balance. There's a whole, I think like, at least for me, I'll just speak for me. Working through my grief last month, it can just feel all encompassing. It can feel like it never ends. It's just this deep, dark hole that you can sort of get lost in. And then, so I think in the tarot, it's a really good reminder that, first of all, that three takes us on a journey through the whole sort of three different layers of the major arcana. But also, like, there's different expressions of three, right? And so maybe if you're feeling grief and it's coming to a place where it's much too heavy, the Three of Pentacles is a reminder that we are not alone, and that we create in community and with help, with mentors or friends, and it can be a really great way to find resource. The Three of Wands can counsel patience, and maybe even the ships are departing and the painful emotions are moving. Let's see, I want you to be able to see the ships. That perhaps the painful emotions are moving through the ocean, which often symbolizes emotions, and they're moving and things are happening, and you just have to be patient and wait for the cycle to end. And then, of course, like, not forgetting that even with so much suffering, there's still joy, right? And so how can you remember your joy even when you're doing really intense grief work? So I hope that was helpful. I hope that y'all come to the ritual this evening. We'll be doing some resourcing and community, a la the Three of Cups, before we do some grief work and sharing. And I think it'll be a really special way to honor the new moon in Virgo. So thank you so much, and have a blessed Virgo season.